Hi everyone, let's talk about Tapestry. If you've just found yourself here and are wondering where the game is and you want to see the components and stuff laid out, you see all of that in the full playthrough that I did. There's linked in the description. You don't have to watch the whole thing, don't worry about that. But yeah, more components and how the game works and stuff is in there. This is more about what we thought of it. So I've only played it a few times now, but I'm finding myself enjoying it and being impressed and intrigued by it more and more with each play. This isn't what I kind of imagine in a Civilization game. It's very different to... I've only really played Through the Ages and Nations. I will say in advance that, yeah, if you're not familiar with my videos, I really do not like conflict in games, so the general 4X stuff, the extermination part, completely turned off by that, and even Through the Ages has too much of it for us, but Nations, we can tolerate or completely ignore. So generally, I'm not that well versed in Civilization games, but in computer games, which a lot of them seem to be based on, you expect a certain kind of mold of starting out very basic, going up these tech trees, and spreading out on the map and inevitably fighting with the other civilizations that are there. And yeah, the other Civilization games, Nations and Through the Ages, kind of abstract that, and you are putting out these cards that represent, your military power. You haven't actually got a map that you are spreading out on. And Tapestry kind of, it's more inspired by all of these things, but has got elements of them, but it doesn't feel like, I can see it being a shock to people that buy it because they like Civilization games rather than knowing what it's about in advance. Whereas it definitely is a Civilization game, but maybe not as we know it. It's got a map in the middle of the board that you are spreading out on and exploring and gaining resources and maybe, getting to build buildings by spreading out on that map. You do have combat in a sense, and you can, spread out yourself and take other people's territories and stuff. But yeah, it's done in a way that I can't think of a way that it's been done like this before. So let's get out of the way. I said that we really, really don't like combat in games, and yeah, I'm still a bit tentative of hearing that there was a bit in Tapestry, but knowing that it was definitely toned down. Combat works in this game, if you haven't seen the playthrough, in that you can do a combat action, and you can either just spread out into a space that's adjacent to one that you already own, or you can spread out into a space that somebody is already in, only if they have just their token in there. If there's two tokens in a space, you can't go in there. So you go in there in combat, you topple their piece over and your piece is there. Now there's two pieces in there, and that is done. Combat is just decided. There's no dice rolling, there's no combat cards and comparing this and that. It's just you win the combat. If nobody has done a combat before in there, you win that combat, and you've taken somebody's thing, and you just own it forever now. Nobody else can perform a combat in that space again. And it effectively means that certain points through the game, when you have income and various abilities throughout the tech tracks in the game, will reward you with points for the number of hexes that you control by having your piece still standing up in it. And so effectively, by taking somebody's space, you are denying them that amount of points. You don't know how many incomes, it depends on how many incomes they got left. You don't know which spaces they were going to take on that board, so it's hard to say how many points you would lose them, but each time income comes up, you have lost them a point and gained yourself a point, which, yeah, is a huge kind of departure from combat. Even in combat was definitely toned down in Scythe, another of Stonemeyer's and Jamie Stegmaier's designs. That's in Scythe, combat wasn't this huge thing that was always happening, but the thing that kind of put us off it ultimately was always this threat of combat that I was definitely really, impressed by, but definitely wasn't the atmosphere we wanted to be playing at all. That actually performing combat could really set you back and really make you weak and ready for other people to pounce on you. So there was always this threat that, this player's got power and they could unleash it at any time, but also completely turn the tables on them once they have unleashed that power. In this, you will always win that combat. So there is always a thought of, am I leaving myself open to someone taking this space I could race for the middle space and get the 10-point bonus that's there for the achievement, but someone is inevitably going to... I'm not going to end the game with that space in there, so you kind of know going in that someone can take it. And then there are these trap cards that you can get in your Tapestry cards that just negate somebody doing that. That's when they try and take your thing, they put their piece in your space, but their piece gets laid down instead. So you still keep control of the space, but no combat can happen in there again because there are still 2 pieces in there, but their piece happens to be laid over instead. Now, still, when we started going into the game, we didn't play with we did the conquer action, but we were just conquering into our own spaces and stuff. But more and more, I'm thinking that there's a lot of games that we kind of play in our own peaceful way, and games that maybe have a bit more of a bite to them, we kind of just tone down and just know that isn't going to happen. And sometimes that messes up games, taking away that edge from them. But in Tapestry, I'm thinking more and more that would this bother us that much? Because it is just, at the end of the day, it's just losing points. And you can be in positions where, somebody can get some conquer actions in a row, and in rare occurrences as well, in that usually it's just one at a time. There are some combinations that can happen, but generally it's just going to be one at a time, and you can end up, cut off from the map and stuff, but you can still discover new tiles and expand into your own area, and you are you're limited. No, one person can't dominate the entire map because you've got a limited number of your outpost tokens as well. So there are all these things, I think, mitigating the combat in there. It's still in there. Conquering is still there. There's still a map to try and spread yourself across the most and get the most points for it. But it definitely feels like something a lot more palatable to us, and that it is just an equal part of all of the other elements, which is a big thing in Civilization, the video game, that it's not just about having some kind of military victory. There are a lot of other ways that you can win the entire game without going down that route. And I wouldn't say that it feels like you're going for a cultural victory, for example, but it's all about getting points, and military is just another way of doing it that isn't stronger than going for the technology cards, or for going for exploration a lot, or for going for the advantage that science comes. It's got these 4 tracks that definitely, as I said, it's early days. I've only played it a few times, but it feels like each time there is a lot of variability going on that just kind of nudges you in different directions. Nothing says that you need to do anything. Your civilization, you can just completely ignore it if you go in a way that doesn't particularly benefit it. I did that in our first game, and while it definitely didn't reach the 300 score that the rulebook says is great, I won that game, and I didn't mean to, but I completely ignored what my civilization card benefits were, because it was one where I would get resources and things, and then eventually points if I put buildings on there instead of my map. But I had ended up filling up loads of spaces and gotten loads of rewards for having rows and columns filled in my map, that I thought, well, I'll just go for that instead. And similarly, you can end up with things like in the playthrough where I ended up with multiple civilizations. I do apologise, I ran out of voice. It's one of those games where I went on and on about this in Foothills, which is a 2-player only game, but I feel like this would be true at higher player counts as well. It's a game of kind of opportunities and seeing what you are making available to other people by the action you take, and what you can take advantage of after another player's turn. That there is the map that I mentioned, and you can take an action to explore and put new tiles out there, but that could make a perfect opportunity for a player to come in, and that's a new space that they can come and do combat in, and maybe that's going to spread them into your area, or it's going to make them have access to that middle space that's got it's worth not a huge amount of points in the grand scheme of things, but 10 points just for going in that one space, whether you own it or not at the end of the game, makes it attractive. And whether or not a person is racing for a certain track, you get these buildings that only the first player to enter a new tier of each of these tech tracks gets this building. And that can be, it can be a big thing that you really want to race for, or, it can be something that you devote a load of resources to that actually you didn't really need. There is a lot going on in the particular brand of map that you've got for your capital city. Does that building even fit in there? Are you even going to get that many points for filling in this row or column? Maybe it's the game is getting on now, and you haven't really gone for that at all. So really, what were you racing for this building for? It's a really nice incentive that early on can really push you along those tracks, but it can be a bit of a trick as well, a bit of a mirage that it's something to be chasing for, it's something to be first on, but was it really worth it? It's similar way that the income turns reward the person who did it first with extra resources that you end up getting 1, 2, and 3 resources on your second, third, and fourth income rounds. But that's kind of to make up for if you did the income round first. It's probably because you ran out of resources first, because you probably aren't leveraging, you probably aren't getting as many buildings out or getting as many nice combos or bonuses from things, so you probably need that nudge in resources, and the few extra that you're getting probably aren't making up for the fact that you were forced to do that income turn. And that's a really nice way that the game works as well. That it's following this. I think other than Viticulture, most Stonemaier games don't really follow this regimented structure, or at least Jamie's games. Wingspan has a normal round structure, but in Tapestry, it isn't about rounds and turns and things. You just keep taking turns until the game ends, and you are usually just going to advance on a track and perform the action that is on there. But eventually, usually when you are forced to because you haven't got any resources left, you take your income round, but you want to leave that as late as possible, because that's when your civilization power is going to trigger, but also you get to upgrade tech cards, all of your visible victory points are scored, and you get your income of resources, and then can go on doing the normal advancements. And it takes a great thing that's it was previously in Scythe. I wouldn't claim that preempting the comments. I wouldn't claim that Scythe was the first to do it. Terra Mystica does it. When you place these buildings out onto your map, you are uncovering income. You are uncovering resources or point scoring opportunities. That could just be flat out points, or could just be points for all the tech cards that you have. And there's definitely a distinct flavour to each of the explore, science, military, and technology tracks. They are definitely going for their own thing, but they have just enough interlocking elements that, oh, well, halfway through the explore track, I'm going to get points for all of the hexes that I control. So I should have been doing some military here. And towards the end of the technology track, I'm going to get points for each space that I travelled along the military and science tracks. So depending on which one I'm favouring, because I don't feel like you should go for kind of halfway amongst everything. You should probably, you need to have your toe in, you need to have a toe in each of the 4 waters. But yeah, have something as your focus and know what that's going to reward you for. And okay, well, this track's suddenly going to give me a house of my choice. So which track have I been going up that I can really leverage that and get loads of the rewards off that particular track? There is a lot of, there's a lot of paying attention to what is going on, on the map, on the tracks. Where am I in the competition? What are the opportunities that I have available to me on that map? What tapestry cards have I got? They're another thing that are giving you a little nudge. They are never, dictating what you need to do. Unless, in your first turn, you're probably going to have one tapestry card and you're going to have to play it. So that might guide your thing, but that's kind of up to you if you've left yourself with just one tapestry card. I think all of the tracks early on allow you to earn more tapestry cards, so yeah, it's you can just end up with just one regimented option, but they're never things that you can't leverage them massively, and depending on when they come up in the game, they can be more and less useful, where like you can have one that means that all of the bonuses that cost 1 extra resource are free to you for this round. So, if you are early on in certain tracks, now you're suddenly incentivized to go up those tracks because you are going to get that really, that free bonus. That can be a load of free resources if you can really leverage that. Or like the one I got in the game, which was in your income, when you get food, you can choose to have it as something else instead of food and get points when you do that. So that's not only incentivized me to the era before that, try and get as much food as possible, but then try and completely ignore food, which means the exploration I was really doing, I was completely not going to do for an era because I'd turned my food into other stuff, which then pushed me onto other things. But I didn't have to do that at all. I could have just, done that once with my food and just gotten a little bonus and carried on the way that I was going. It's the perfect balance, really, of not saying that this is powerful enough that I'm just going to have to do this thing, but it lets you think about, if I did this, I could really make this thing work. There are so many kind of opportunities and different ways that you can go about this that I feel like, that having all of these different civilization cards and the tapestry cards and the location maps, I feel like they really are going to make a difference. As much as the players are going to make a difference in a game with higher player counts, that's all of these different elements coming together, as well as where you are racing on the tracks or spreading out on the maps and stuff, is really, really going to make a big difference as the game goes on. So at a higher player count, it's of course going to make a difference for racing up those tracks and the map in the middle. The map does change. In the playthrough, it's the 1 to 3 player side of the board. There is a bigger board for 4 and 5 players. So the game's going to be tightest on the map with 3 players, but with the first time we played the game, as it recommended, we didn't play with the Shadow Empire, so we kind of went into this thing that does tend to happen with just there's 4 tracks and there's 2 players. So okay, I'm racing up this one, so Rach isn't going to bother with that one because I'm already quite ahead on that, so she'll go for this one. And so okay, Rach has gone for that one, so I'll go for this one, and it just ends up that we kind of were strongest in 2 and weren't that bothered about racing for 2 of them, and kind of just ended up that way. There wasn't as much competition for it, which is where the Shadow Empire is really good, because I haven't had a chance to play the Ultima variant yet, but Ultima Factory is always flawless in their execution of solo variants, and this uses something that has been perfectly used in the Euphoria solo expansion that was the last Stonemaier release, I think, and in Gaia Project it was used as well, where you draw these 2 cards and the middle section of those cards defines what the player is doing, rather than the rules for the Ultima, which are they're trying to replicate somebody playing with you, but somebody that can be somewhat predicted and manipulated, not very much, but you have a bit of foreknowledge that you wouldn't have with a normal player, but then the Ultima gets to cheat. The Shadow variant uses a kind of a toned down, an easier version of the Ultima, where you are just paying attention to one box that shows which of the tracks they're going to go up. So it tightens the race for it. In the playthrough, there was some umming and ahhing, and it kind of went all over the place. But then it really started shooting for science, to the point where we hadn't really gone for science that early. And then at a certain point, okay, well, the Shadow Empire got science. We're not going to get any of those buildings, so let's try and concentrate on these 3 things. And so there was always quite fierce competition for 1 or 2 of those 3 tracks. And then by the end, you can still go up science and just accept that you're not getting those buildings when they're not available anymore. It's a really nice thing where it's not got... the Ultima hasn't got a huge overhead. It's always got a bit of a hurdle to learn the flow and maybe the symbols and how the Ultima makes its decisions. It's always got a bit of a hump at the start, but once you get over that and start to learn what those are, it's so smooth and beautiful. Whereas the Shadow Empire doesn't have that hurdle, because it's only got 3 different symbols of what the Ultima's decision is going to be, and then just a tiebreaker order. It's really simple to get going and really tightens up a 2-player game beautifully. I'll say that I've seen already that I don't think a Stonemaier game can get announced anymore without getting a ton of backlash from people. I think if you find yourself getting really annoyed that a Stonemaier game has been announced, take a break, go do something else before just getting so angry about it. But I think that if you just go into it expecting a Civilization game as you have seen before, and see that it's drawn inspiration from Nations or Through the Ages or Civilization itself, the video game, or the board game, then yeah, it has, but it has amalgamated all of that stuff into a very different thing. I feel, that I've seen people annoyed that there are anachronistic things, that you are still in the era of inventing fire, and you have come up with the idea of lithium-ion batteries or penicillin. But yeah, I think that for one, it's maybe not meant to be taken, very seriously. There isn't eras and stuff. It's done for variability, that all of this stuff can come out at any time, and so that makes for a huge amount of combinations. Whereas in a game like Nations, the cards are set up into different eras, and there are a huge number of cards to kind of compensate for the fact that they can only exist in their own era, whereas Tapestry does it by just having all of the cards out there. And I kind of went through in the playthrough that the light bulb as a technology card, if you were coming up with that really early on into the game, when you're that primitive level of civilization, you aren't actually making a light bulb. You're having the idea for, oh, it's dark in here, we should think of a way of it not being dark in here anymore, rather than they actually went out and made a light bulb. But yeah, I do think it's more of a loose weave thing that you have to be kind of forgiving for. So yeah, if you think that would bother you, then yeah, Tapestry might not be for you. But anyway, the playthrough is there, and you've already seen that and decided what you thought of the game long before you saw any of this waffling. Congratulations for getting to the end of it, though. I think I am going to go and film the next game, because more and more things need to be made. There are hundreds of playthroughs on this channel, though. I hope that this gave you some kind of perspective on Tapestry, but the playthrough is there if you are still wanting more. Running out of steam, aren't I? I'm losing my voice and running out of sense. I'm going to see you for the next game. Bye, everyone.